Alright guys, welcome back. Hope you've all had a fantastic Christmas and New Year. Right, so in this video I'm going to be attempting to build something. I'm not sure if it's going to work out. I'm not sure I've got the skill set to actually pull it off, but I'm going to give it a good go. So I've got a few ideas for projects in the future that involve making box joints. Now there's a number of ways you can make box joints. You can do it on a router table. You can cut them by hand, but I haven't got the time, patience or skill set to do that. Or you can do it on a table saw. Now, some people use a dado stack, and although my table saw will accept a dado stack, I can't justify spending the ludicrous amounts of money that they want to buy something that I'm only going to use a handful of times every now and then. I could also buy a grooving blade, but I haven't got one of those either. What I want to do is build a jig for the table saw which uses a single blade, but I don't just want to make a simple jig that will only cut fingers the same width as the blade kerf. What I want to do is make an adjustable finger joint or box joint jig that I can use with a single blade but make different thickness of joints. So that is what I'm going to try and do in this video. So I just want to say it's not my design. I've watched countless videos on YouTube and seen a few ideas that I actually like, so I'm not going to attribute this to any particular YouTuber because, like I said, I've watched loads of videos and I've taken a couple of different designs that I'm going to try and duplicate on my own jig. So enjoy the video. So to make the jig, I'm going to be using this piece of 18mm or 3/4 inch piece of plywood that was left over from an old workshop cabinet. I'm going to try and make the majority of the jig from this single piece. As usual, I've got no plans or dimensions written down. I normally have an idea in my mind and then I run with it, start building, and it's fun to see what I actually end up with at the end. Here you can see me standing there scratching my head, trying to work out sizes. So the first couple of bits I want to put together using a housing joint or dado, slot, groove, whatever terminology you like to use. So I do that by making multiple passes on the table saw, moving the fence very slightly every time, and if you're careful you should end up with a nice tight fitting joint. So for the runners I'm going to be using some salvaged sapele which I rescued from a skip, believe it or not. And I'm using the same process to get it down to the correct thickness so it slides freely in the mitre slot with no side to side movement. And then once I've got it to the correct thickness, I can then cut it down to the right depth, and I'm doing it slightly shallower than the depth of the Ttrack itself. So once I've got it to the correct height and width, I then chop it down to length on the mitre saw. So to fit the first two pieces together, I'm using a combination of normal wood glue with a couple of dabs of CA glue. The CA glue will act as a clamp and dry fairly quickly while the normal wood glue dries, and that way I don't have to wait for the glue to dry and can get on with adding the screws. So to fix them runners to the jig, I've put some lolly sticks in the tracks just to raise them above the height of the table saw, and then I'm going to use a very small amount of normal wood glue and a few dabs of CA glue, again because the CA glue allows you to move on to the next step fairly quickly. Then I use my table saw fence to line everything up on the runners so I can get it nice and square. So after about 10 minutes I can lift the jig out, remove the lolly sticks from the mitre slots, and then just check the fit and make sure everything slides as it should. Then I can drill, countersink and drive in some screws just to secure it all in place. Now, one thing I always find when you're making runners, when you first glue them on, they slide really well, and then the minute you put the screws in, they seem to tighten up. So I gave it a little bit of hand sanding, and it is still a little bit sticky, but I'm going to be adding some wax underneath anyway, so for now that will do, and I can get on with making the initial cut. So here I'm adding some side supports. They serve two purposes. One, it adds support to the front section and keeps it at 90 degrees. And two, it's going to help hold the template pieces in position. And these just get secured in the same way with glue and screws. Then I can add a small section of CLS timber, and that's just to raise the height of the jig slightly, and that gets screwed from underneath, making sure to countersink all the holes properly so I don't end up scratching the table saw surface. So I had some leftover Ttrack from a previous project, so figured I would use that on the sliding section of this jig, and that will allow me to actually use one of those hold down clamps to secure the workpieces to the jig. I haven't actually got the clamp at the moment, but figured I would fit the Ttrack now. I can also cut this down a bit because it doesn't need to be the same width as the rest of the jig. Right, so the section you can see with the Ttrack, which is not fitted in there yet, this is part of the jig which is going to slide on the main body of the jig. So there's going to be a piece of ply screwed through from the front through the Ttrack into this bit, and then I'm going to attach another bit on it like that, which will lock this section onto the main body of the jig and allow it to slide backwards and forwards. Now, because I don't want this to be too tight, what I've done, I put 3 layers of masking tape before putting this down and clamping it in place, and I've also put some masking tape along this edge, so when I actually fit these pieces in position, that should give me enough space for it to slide freely. It'll all make sense as I put it together. So now I can secure the Ttrack in place and finish off the sliding part on the jig. The last thing I need to do is cut the slot at the back, which is going to take the pin, and I just use the table saw to do that. And then I need to mess around and try and cut a pin which is more or less the same curve as the table saw blade. As usual, it takes a few attempts to get this right, but eventually I ended up with a fairly snug fit. And now I can fit the final piece and the jig is complete. So all that's left to do is remove the masking tape and check it slides like it should. Then I can slide the pin as far to the right as I can get it until it touches the side. Then I can make a cut in the front, and that's going to allow me to add a pin. Then I can butt a support piece for the workpieces to butt up against and get it as close to the kerf of the blade as I can. And this gets secured with glue and screws. So that's the main jig done. Now I need to make the templates. So to start with, I'm just going to make 2 sets of templates. One set using 18mm or 3/4 of an inch plywood, and the second set going to be using 1/2 inch or 12mm plywood. Now the beauty of this jig is you can make any thickness of template you like. I probably will end up making some 6mm templates as well, but for now I'm just going to start off with 2 different sets. The templates I'm making are basically small rectangles. Mine measure 6 centimeters by 4 centimeters, and to get them all consistent I set up a stop block on the miter saw. And do be careful if you're doing this, because there is a danger the workpiece is going to get trapped between the blade and the stop. So the last thing to do is come up with an idea to clamp all the pieces in place. So I had a bit of a rummage through all my bits and pieces and found a plastic knob with an M8 bolt on. So I'm just going to use one of those T-nuts, and I'm going to screw this knob into place, and I'll just use one of the templates which I'm going to mark clamp. So I use the same piece in case it gets squashed slightly, and then I'm just going to wind it in, and hopefully that will hold all the template in place and stop them from moving around. I also gave all the templates a super quick sanding on the disc sander. I didn't do the faces, I just done the edges just to remove any furry bits. And that is the jig and the templates finished. Then it's just a place of alternating all the pieces. So you put one upright, one laying down, one upright, and so on until you filled up the space. And then right at the end I just put my clamp block in, wind the knob in, and that should tighten all the template pieces and stop them from moving. So that's the jig finished. All I need to do now is make some test cuts and see whether all my hard work and effort have actually paid off. But don't make the mistake that I'm making when setting the blade height. I set it on the table, went to make the cut, and realised I was supposed to put the workpiece on the jig and then set the blade. So having reset the blade to the correct height, this jig is designed to cut 2 pieces at the same time. So you butt your first piece up against the support, Then take one of your template pieces and you butt the next piece up to the template. Then you can clamp both pieces in position, and once you get them clamped in position you can remove the template and start making the cuts. So I push it to the right as far as you can get it, make a cut, then slide it all the way to the left, make a cut, and then hog out the bit in the middle. So here's a view from the back. So once you've cleared out a slot, you just lift this section up, move it to the next gap, move it to the right, make your cut, then move it to the left, make a cut, and then take out the bit in the middle. And it's as easy as that. So ignoring the fact that I've got curved edges on one side, flat on the other side, so what I should have done is laid them the right way, because I've got a flat against a rounded. But to give you an idea, these joints are way too tight. They will go together with a bit of a shove, but if you're trying to glue the joint, it's no good if it's just too tight. So that means my pin isn't quite wide enough. So I'm going to cut another pin and try again. Right, so ignoring the fact that this wood is rubbish old pallet wood, I made the pin slightly bigger on this attempt. Now, it is still a little bit tight, but for the purposes of the video, I'm going to call that done. And I'll probably play around with a pin off camera. But considering I was doubting myself to whether I could actually build a jig that actually worked, I'm really happy with that. So, happy days. So, if I'm honest, I was actually doubting whether or not this would actually turn out the way I expected it to. Maybe I should give myself a little bit more credit, but at the end of the day, I've not wasted my time. It works. I need to make a few tweaks with the thickness of the pin so I can dial the box joints how I want them. Not too tight, but not too loose. And I also want to put a block on the front just in case you push it too far forward and the blade comes through the front side of the jig. But rather than put a simple block on, I'm thinking about putting some sort of stop that will hook onto the front of the table saw and only allow you to push the jig far enough, if that makes sense. So a few tweaks here and there and I should be able to get it working spot on, and I'll be able to cut different width box joints. Right, as always, I want to give a massive thanks to all my regular subscribers for their continued support. I also want to give a big warm welcome to any new subscribers that have joined the channel recently. Hello, welcome. I'm Dave and you've been watching Grumpy's Workshop, the workshop where mistakes are often made, but I don't cut them out the videos. I leave all my mistakes in so you don't have to make the same mistakes that I do. So here's a quick fun fact for you before I go. I was looking at my YouTube analytics the other day and working out how many subs I get each week, and working on that basis I worked out it's only going to take me 181.3 years to reach 100,000 subs. So, not long at all. But seriously, on a serious note, I really do appreciate each and every one of you that have subbed and support the channel. So, thanks. So, until the next video, stay safe and you will see me in the next video. Cheers for watching, guys.